How you doing today, Brian?
Well, we're off to a good start with a new year. And part of what I've been reflecting on, really has to do with those elements that I think are foundationally important to having a successful team and really being able to affect a successful leadership within the workplace and within the culture that you're trying to help curate. And for me, that comes down to a critical factor. Let's just call it what it is: trust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and we kind of went all over the board, but you say trust, and trust comes to me. It's about caring, right? It's about caring about your people, caring about their work-life balance, caring about them as individuals, caring about their career growth. Um, just genuinely caring about them and not gossiping, right? Be having that open line of communication. That there's a lot of layers to trust, right? It's like an onion, and we just kind of like only peeled back a small amount of the layers. I feel like.
Absolutely. And it is something that we can go deep on it because there are so many layers. For me, reliability is one of those critical factors. Really making sure that your words and deeds align, making sure that that you're not avoiding some of the more difficult issues that are necessary to confront within the team, both to establish the expectation of accountability and results, as well as helping to cultivate an openness to asking questions and debating topics in a way that can be productive and healthy versus just making people feel like their ideas are being challenged because they're under attack. Welcome to another edition of Lead.exe. I'm Brian Comerford in Denver, Colorado.
And I'm Nick Lozano in Washington, D.C.
And I'm battling a little bit of a cold today, so pardon my congestion.
I think that'll be fine, Brian.
Nick, I thought it would be interesting to talk about a subject that I imagine every leader is confronted with, both from within the team as well as within themselves at various points in their career, and that subject is trust.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of directions that we can take it, but this is a topic that resonates with me. I think it's something that I've seen a lot of examples of in my professional career, both the absence of trust as well as the well-functioning of a trusting team environment. So I'd like to hear a little bit from you about, where's that take your mind when I just kind of spring that topic on you?
So when you say trust to me, from a leadership perspective or a leader, I instantly think about caring, right? That's the number one thing I think of when I think of trust. That you're a leader, that you actually care about the people that you're leading. I care about Brian as an individual. I care about your personal goals. I care about your career aspirations. I care about your work life balance, and I care about your family obligations, right? And I'm not talking about just, hey, Brian, I care about that stuff. I'm talking about actually, truly, genuinely caring about you as an individual and as a person, um, and as a member of the team. So when I go back to me, my mind, caring's the most important thing when I think of trust. Because if you care about your people, and the caring is genuine, and people can tell, right, when you're being fake and when you're not. Um, you know, instantly when you care about your people, they can instantly tell. Where the heck am I going with this? But I'm just gonna say, like when you care about people and it's genuine, um, they know your intentions as a leader is that you're doing the best that you can for them. You're a part of the team. You work with them. They don't work for you. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think the genuineness of that caring is part of what I just heard you say.
Hmm.
And when you are authentic in having a high degree of empathy, either for your coworkers, for your organization, for your direct reports, that's ultimately what helps to feed that mentality of caring, right?
Hmm.
It's actually taking the time to stop all the mental chatter and truly listen to what's going on around you, right? Whether you're in a direct conversation or it's something over time where, I know you and I have been in presentation mode together before, where you know we've talked specifically about what does that mean when you've actually got authentic relationships. I know you like to talk about walk your shift, but there's also I think the fact that you could openly point out specific things that you know about me and what some of those things in my own personal life are that are important to me. And, that I think also feeds into some of that caring where, as coworkers, we can trust that we know who we are as people. We know how that feeds into our personal value system, and we know how to kind of orient ourselves with each other in the way that we work or find a style of working together. Does that
Hmm.
sound fair?
Sounds like a fair summary of what I said, more eloquently put.
I don't know about that, but well, and I know that you and I are also recent fans of Brene Brown's book "Braving the Wilderness," and the Braving acronym. Um, which to me, I think a lot of the things that are key in that book, and it's a short book, it's a quick read, so it's one that I know that I advocate reading, and I think you would probably do the same. But braving, as that acronym: boundaries, reliability, accountability, vault, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity. Right.
Hmm.
Um, all of those things to me help create that sense of foundation for where trust comes from, whether it's in personal relationships, whether it's in the work environment. Um, and I think one of those, I guess you could call the litmus test, right, for how much trust do you actually feel is in the workplace, right? One of those things that I think can help measure whether or not it's there is, how much background chatter, how much gossip, right, is really going on. How much are people questioning, what is this person saying, or can you believe that that just happened? Um, you know, to me, it's when you've got indicators like that in the workplace, it's corrosive because it starts to take away from anybody being able to just take what someone else says at face value, right? There's
Hmm.
always this lingering in the back of the mind, criticality, right? Analysis of, you know, like, what am I reading between the lines here? Because it couldn't really be that simple. And that can be destructive on, just being able to execute in harmony as a
Hmm.
workforce, don't you think?
Yeah, I agree, and I think something you brought up is a big thing. There's gossiping, right? When does gossip happen? It's when leaders don't actively communicate with their team members, and it allows their team members an opportunity to just make up whatever they think is going on, right? And then rumors spread, instead of opening a line of communication about, hey, the boss wants us to do this. I'm not a big fan of it, but we need to get this done, so XYZ, so we can increase sales. Instead of not letting communicating with their staff up and down, is leaving gossip to kind of happen, and it kind of erodes that trust, right? Because if you let people, give them time to think on their own what's going to happen, it's never going to be good, right? Gossip's going to happen. And if we go back to the thing, I say this all the time, the walking your shift thing. If we're walking around talking to our people having engaging conversations, letting them know the why, the Simon Sinek, right? Start with why we're doing something. We can kind of stop some of the gossip before it even happens.
For sure. The to me, going back to that braving acronym, it's the reliability. And reliability means a number of things, and I think it's very critical to be incumbent on leaders to be reliable, and particularly when you're talking about ensuring that your words and your actions match,
Hmm.
right? Because then that's the kind of thing that creates the confidence among your team members and within the workplace, that I think helps mitigate against the gossip factor. When people have the confidence that what you say and what you do are in alignment, and that you're not going to go ask somebody to do something that is outside of their personal integrity or your own or the organization's integrity, then that's part of what I think helps um, mitigate against people really questioning, what's the intent behind the scenes here,
Hmm.
and start letting the gossip mind take over with all this chatter, trying to you know analyze what might be the hidden agenda. you know
Yeah, yeah, 100% agree. What you say and what you do speaks volumes, right? It's kind of like the old thing parents always say: "Do as I say, not as I do." Right?
Mhm.
And then children see what their parents are doing, and then they're just going to go ahead and replicate what they see, right? Because the actions speak louder than words. Um, and as we go back to you know um, you're speaking of the trust and the rumors and fear. We're kind of bringing up fear, right? And in the book Creativity Inc., Ed Catmull had a great quote. It was like, fear can be created quickly, but trust cannot. Right? As soon
Mhm.
as we break that trust, it's really hard to gain it back. It's like a piece of paper, right? You crumble it up, but you can never make it flat again. And that's the way trust is. When you as a leader, um, don't do what you say you'll do when you say you will do it, right? When you act differently than what your words say. And you might people might think that they're getting away with things. Eventually, in the end, it always catches back up with them, right? People are smarter than you think they are. Um, and if you try to go back behind their back and do something different, other they see it. They know they see it. And that's when the gossip starts, right?
Yeah, that reminds me. There's a book by Patrick Lencioni called "The Five Dysfunctions of a Team," and in that one, he really spells out, what are those issues, and graphically, it's represented like a triangle where trust is that foundation, right? And so the absence of trust, of course, ends up being that critical first. It's like a force multiplier for all of these other dysfunctions, right? When the absence of trust is at the foundation of the working dynamic of your team, that is part of what breeds all those other layers that are ultimately driven by fear. I mean, exactly what you're talking about. The trust is hard to come by. The fear is something that um, that's uh, that's a swift breeder, right?
Exactly. I mean, leading with fear is not the way to go, right? It might get something resolved very quickly, but you're burning your leadership capital when you lead with fear. There's going to come to a point where people just aren't going to put up with it, right? No one wants to work for a dictator, and your team will suffer for it. When you lead with by fear, you're leading like a dictator. I mean, how do dictators control countries? They control countries through fear. When you lead your teams with fear, yelling, screaming, doing things behind their back, that's exactly what you're doing. You're not being trustworthy. So why would anyone want to work with that?
It's true, but let's think about the psychology of that for a minute, because dictators often don't just seize control, right? You think
Hmm.
about the history of some very successful dictatorships, and One in particular comes to mind where, we had fair and free elections of someone like Adolf Hitler, right,
Hmm.
who was given the power and continued to encroach on taking more power that again was freely given. And
Hmm.
I think part of that is done through that tactic of fear, right? But I think another part of it is when in a trusting environment, I think you as a worker and your coworkers have the confidence to be able to speak out, right? And that
Hmm.
may be, let's voice some ideas, let's openly debate some things. In technology in particular, you and I both know there's multiple ways to skin a cat. I mean, there's not just a single solution for anything that you might need to accomplish. But uh, part of the I think the creativity in being a technologist comes from looking at the various ways that you can solve some of these challenges. And so, you know, we're all better when we're openly voicing things that we have from our own experience, our own knowledge, our own ideation, all right, that we can contribute to the conversation. Where this draconian sort of perspective comes in, that not only comes with fully baked ideas where it's like any question that's asked is going to be considered an attack, which just seems irrational. But that's part of what I think this dictatorial mindset that we're talking about, right? And that's part of what it breeds. But conversely, it's how swiftly then does that kind of approach work to shut down other people from asking questions? And how quickly then is it that a team starts to fall apart where like no one feels like, well, wait a second, I can't say anything about that. I can't poke any holes in this. I can't offer any alternate opinions or provide, a variety of options. It's going to be this one way or not at all.
Hmm.
And pretty soon, you start losing what I think is the more skillful dynamic of having a strong, team. And particularly as a technical leader, you want to make sure that you've got, a lot of arrows in your quiver, right? That
Hmm.
you're not just saddled with one specific skill set. You want people to be able to work together that can complement each other. And so, I think the other component to me about that sort of dictatorial approach is, one of the first indicators is shutting down questions and, creating an environment that is hostile to, anyone sharing an alternate opinion. So I'm kind of curious about, what you think of that. If I'm just speaking out of turn here, that's something that you've seen or, have your own views on.
No, I agree with you, and we go back to talk about this, style. Um, you know, I guess authoritarian is kind of what we're talking about. My way or the highway. They tend to build
Mhm.
their teams with a bunch of yes men and yes women, right? And that's really not the best way to build your team. I really want somebody who's going to challenge my opinion, to guess that maybe my assumptions are wrong, right? Maybe the ideas we're having, we're not thinking about them correctly. And, when we operate as a team with a bunch of yes people, um, eventually those teams fail, right? Because they're relying on one person to make every decision. They're micromanaged. And, your shining stars don't hang around to be on those teams to make them be
Mhm.
successful, because it's just a terrible work environment. I'm sure we've all worked in some environment that at some point in time, whether it's in technology or some other um, field or job we had in college or high school or something. Um, but you definitely don't want to surround yourself with a bunch of yes people. In my opinion, I want the people who are going to challenge my opinions and my thoughts and my ideas. We're going to have a civil discourse, right? And challenge each other's ideas. And that helps us deliver a better product, deliver a better customer solution, or widgets, whatever we're building.
Well, and to take it back to what you were saying initially about caring, I think when you feel that your voice is being heard within a team, and particularly when you feel like there's some resonance that's happening between you and whoever the leader of your team is, that's when you really start to derive a sense of personal value, right?
Hmm.
It's a contribution that's not just being easily dismissed, even if the idea is something that it's been thought about and there's reasons why we're not going to try that. Feeling like you've got an open opportunity to voice something, to be heard, and someone to say, "Yep, no, I agree with you. That you're thinking in the right way."
Hmm.
Here are the reasons why we might not want to do that. To me, those are leadership characteristics where, you know, as a leader, we create a sense in the environment of being open and approachable, even if our subordinates are making mistakes, or missing some of the critical details where an idea that they're suggesting might not be the right fit. It's that's where we as leaders then have an opportunity to be able to help guide someone along,
Hmm.
and show them, no, that you're thinking correctly on these things here. Here's where there's a couple of gaps, right?
Hmm.
Don't forget about this detail, or never assume, and be able to really work as someone who's helping to cultivate and develop that critical thinking, particularly in a technical environment where it's so important that you've got things really airtight by the time they get into a production environment.
No, I completely agree with you. It goes back to that old saying. What I can't remember. Is it build? Give me a brick, don't build me a cathedral, right? um, or it goes. It's something like that. I can't remember 100 word for word. But as leaders, we should be giving them bricks so that they can build the buildings. We don't
Mhm.
build a cathedral and turn to them and say, "Hey, build this." Right? That our team doesn't grow that way. We're not fostering the trust in between them that they'll get the job done. You know, we hire people for a reason, right? We hire them to do a job because we think they're competent and they can do it, not so that we can stand behind them and tell them exactly what we want them to do. If that were the case, then why did we even hire somebody? Right? You might as well just do it yourself. um, but that, like you said, that's often we're talking about, coaching your people, right? Bringing them up to speed slowly. Um, we should be doing everything we can as leaders to help them grow. And that's part of the trust factor, right? As long as, our team members know that we're doing everything we can to help them, um, they're going to do more for you. It's like, Gary Vaynerchuk always says, he's like, once you realize that you work for your people and your people don't work for you, your life will become so much easier. Because for your team members, the economics aren't there, right? If we own a software development company, why would our software engineers care about hitting revenue numbers for the year? They're not going to care. The economics aren't there for them, right? um, until flip your thinking, and try to drive change and let them know that, hey, I care about you. I want you to be the best software developer you can be. What can I do to help you? What classes do we need? Do you need more developers on staff? Do I need to challenge you more? Is there more things I can do for you? We need to approach it more like, how can I help you? What can I do for you?
No, it's great, and I think along those same lines, invoking some guiding principles within your team to really demand that, right?
Hmm.
So we were talking a little bit about that, that fear of really being heard, asking questions, right? Um, we could even call that a fear of conflict,
Hmm.
right? You don't want to create the abrasion that comes from, oh, well, I know this certain personality type, and if I ask a question, it's going to be taken as an attack. And
Hmm.
rather than having that guidance, now we're going to have conflict. So I'm just going to withdraw and not say anything at all.
Hmm.
So, again, I think a method for helping to be able to mitigate that is to demand that, right? To make sure that you have clear guiding principles within your team, that says, look, when we're bringing ideas forward, I want to hear something from everyone on the team that can help debate this,
Hmm.
right? We're not going to just take this as, this is the right idea. We think it's the right idea, but we do want to poke holes in it, and we want to be able to get to a place where we feel like we have a consensual commitment that we've thought through all the ins and outs with this thing.
Hmm. No, I completely agree with that, right? And there's different ways that you can kind of handle, the internal communication, right? Um, the way I always kind of like to do it is that I want to hear somebody's idea fully before you let anybody butt in with rebuttals, right? It kind of goes back to the Peter Margaritas thing where we talked about saying yes and instead of no but. I want to hear a fully fleshed out idea before people are starting to challenge it. Let them get to their point. Let them express their idea before we start cutting it off right away and say, no, 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 we can't do that. That's impossible. You don't know what you're talking about. Let's assume that the person across from the table who's speaking knows something that we don't. Whether they're an entry level software engineer or support staff or even the janitor, right? We have to give them that trust and understand that they possibly know something that you don't know, and you have to give them an opportunity to fully flesh out their thought in front of anybody before we start challenging ideas right away, right?
For sure. Being respectful and, again, back to ensuring that your words and your deeds, right, match up. When others see that you do shift into a place of being an empathetic leader, that you are a good listener,
Hmm.
that you demonstrate that you've heard, and that you're respectful in the way that you make a reply, even if it's to say, I'm hearing you, but I don't agree with, the suggestion that you're making, and here are the reasons why. Those are the types of things where, getting on the other side of both the fear as well as the sort of conflictual nature of the interaction. I think it has to be tied to really putting a stake in the ground, demanding that you know these are going to be some of those ways that we interact with each other. So part of what we've done in teams that I've led in the past is creating working agreements, and this is something that you do when you really go through the formation of a team. But as you and I have talked about, in prior episodes, teams are constantly in flux, right? You've got
Hmm.
someone who's being promoted out, you've got someone who's being promoted in, you've got someone who's, moving on, for whatever reason and leaving your team. You've got, dynamics that require you to make some changes in your team. And so teams are constantly in flux. And so establishing working agreements to me isn't just something that's a one and done. It's something that you need to revisit on a periodic basis. You need to make sure that these are still things that we're in agreement with, right?
Hmm.
Um, here's some ideas that were put forward, and we memorialize these. And for me, with other team members that I've helped to lead, you know, we print out those working agreements and everyone's got them pegged, on their pegboard next to their desk so that there's no question. Um, and, so part of what that does is it creates a culture where there's an expectation of everyone to carry a piece of the responsibility,
Hmm.
right? Right. These are the values that we have sought to establish within this team, and we're going to adhere to those things. It's not just about doublespeak, where we're going to get in and, we're going to review these things, and everyone gives a fist of five, and next thing you know, we've got people who are, out violating their social contract because they never really bought into it in the first place. It's the kind of thing where you want to make sure that it's really baked into the culture that you're trying to cultivate and help be a part of as a leader.
No, I get it. And as a leader, you're the one fostering that environment, right? You have to be the one, that creates that environment of trust where everyone can trust each other. Maybe if you come onto a new team and the environment's kind of hostile initially because the leader, the previous leader, put it in a bad state. It's going to be rough going at first, but as long as people understand that they can trust you and you care about them and their ideas as individuals, the trust can be built fairly quickly. And in my past experience, it's real easy to walk into a room and say, "Hey guys, sorry what happened, with your last boss. But I'm happy to be here working with you guys, right? Instead of walking in and say, hey, I heard what happened last time. I'm the boss here now, and none of that stuff's gonna happen on my watch. We're here to work. We're not here to play. Things are gonna get done, and it's two totally different delivery tones. Where the first one, people are more accepting. They're like, hey, this guy's here. He's here to work with us. He's here to be one
Mhm.
of us. Where the other person's being authoritarian, saying none of this is going to happen. It's just going to make the problem worse. Um, and to me, trust and caring are very intertwined. If you care for your people and they understand that you care for them, the trust will come. We can have tough conversations when you know that I care about you as
Mhm.
an individual, as a team member of this team, that I value your opinion. We can talk about um, things where it might get heated, but in the end that I care about you, and it's just us discussing an idea or a thought, being passionate about our conversation.
Yeah, those are great insights, Nick. And I think another component of it is we talked a little bit about creating a culture where you can speak honestly and freely, um, and also being for each other. Right.
Hmm.
That's one that has continued to resonate with me, is being able to be for each other. And sometimes it's just required to ask that question. Right.
Hmm.
Are you really being for so and so when I hear you talk like this? And I think part of that consistency between word and deed includes something that I heard you alluding to, related to transparency. Right?
Hmm.
We hear that term a lot, and it's just one of those buzz terms that gets thrown out there a lot. That to the degree where I feel like it's sort of lost its magnetism. But to me, transparency is I'm going to be very open with you about what my expectations are and what my actions are, and year-end performance reviews, I think, is one of those good examples where if I have a direct report who also has direct reports, I want to be as transparent as possible through the process and say, hey, listen, I wanted to let you know that I'm going to seek some feedback from your direct reports, because I want to get some of their perspective as well on, what your performance has been. I don't just want to have this top-down view of the whole thing. I want to have a little bit of a bottoms-up kind of approach to it. But rather than just sneaking around and scheduling private appointments on your calendar with your direct reports subordinates, and then that's one of those things that starts the rumor mill, and it's like, oh my gosh, what's going on? What's he up to now? Really being for each other by being straightforward with that transparency and bringing it out front and just saying, look, I don't want you to be worried about this. I mean, maybe there is a reason for you to be worried about it, but I'm just seeking some feedback. I want to be able to get some additional perspective. Here's my plan on what I intend to do. Just wanted you to be aware that it was going on. That just immediately, to me, creates a lot more harmony around the trust that you have in the workplace, versus presuming that someone may understand what your intent is, and so you never disclose to them what it is that you're doing, or even worse, not trusting that they have, the reliability in their own integrity, where you could disclose that information openly, and not have it come back to bite you.
Well, if you're worried in that situation, then you as a leader have probably already seen that in action. You've already seen the reason why that person would be worried. But that goes back to the whole thing you're talking about, communication, right? Transparency. Because if you do that, bottom up performance review with their direct reports, the first thing that person, um, that you're doing the performance review on might think, oh man, this guy's trying to hire one of the people under me to replace me.
Right.
If you don't have that
Right.
transparency, and that maybe that's not the situation at all. You're just doing the bottom up reporting. It's the whole thing. Don't assume that people know what your intentions are. If you're not
Exactly.
transparent and you don't speak with them, they're going to gossip. And when people have time to make up things in their mind, they're never good. That person's instantly gonna think, oh, he's gonna fire me. And maybe it's one of your star team players and you have, a succession plan for them to come in and promote them into your role when you get moved up. If you go and do that behind their back, the performance you go from the bottom up, don't tell them what your intentions are. Maybe they're looking for a job because they think you're trying to replace them with somebody who's below them. um,
Right.
but that goes back to the just being transparent, having conversations with your people. I've never been a huge fan of performance reviews. Just because people treat them as a year-end thing, right? They
Hmm.
don't go talk to anybody about what their goals are, what they plan to do in their jobs, what their personal goals are, what their um, life goals are, or anything until the end of the year. And that's way too long to talk to anybody about anything.
Yeah.
You should be having these conversations year long. You could be helping those people grow throughout the whole year, and that's in turn that's going to help your team perform better. They'll help pull the team up. Um, I'm just not a huge fan of performance reviews. I guess that's where I'm getting at that. I hate those things. I don't care what method it is, the 5 words or the star based questions or whatever. I just hate them all because, like I said, everyone treats it as a year end thing that they have to do, and it's always pegged to bonuses or salary compensation, and that's not really things that should be pegged to a review, in my opinion.
Well, it's interesting because, one of those things to me is, back to that five dysfunctions of a team model. When you have avoidance of accountability, right, as a leader, to me, I find it kind of quaint when I hear discussions around, we're going to develop a performance management culture, right? And here are the things that really factor into, what can make that possible. Um, to me, they're just such basic common principles of leadership.
Hmm.
Be having ongoing conversations with people. I mean, that is your performance review right there. It's happening on a routine basis. Sometimes it's happening multiple times a day, right?
Hmm.
Because you've set some expectations of what you believe outcomes should be, right? And then you're actually confronting issues as they happen,
Hmm.
so that you're holding yourself as a leader accountable, but you're also holding your people accountable, to be able to deliver on those outcomes. If all of those things are happening on a routine basis, then, like you, I mean, I just don't feel the need for a performance review. Um, in most cases, I think it's one of those things where it's a check the box activity, for your salary administration. If that's something that you do on an annual basis.
Hmm.
Um, but otherwise, if you're really leading from a performance management perspective, you're just engaged.
Yep.
you know,
You're present.
yeah.
Yeah,
All
don't get me
right.
started on performance reviews. I've got it's just one of those things where people use it as a way to hold things over people's head. And if you're a leader and you're only communicating with your people one time a year what their goals are, you're failing them as a leader. um, you don't wait to get till the end of the year when you have people who are counting on money, or some type of bonus or pay raises, to only talk to them at the end of the year. You're
Hmm.
just failing them, right?
Yeah.
You're not doing your service as a leader to be serving them. And that goes back to the same thing. The sooner you realize that you work for your people and not the other way around, so much better is your job going to be. They're going to make things easy for you. You take care of your people and they'll take care of your customers, your clients, um, your factory workers, whatever you want to, whatever business you're in. If you take care of your people, the rest of everything else will take care of itself. They'll take care of the business. They'll keep everything in check. You don't have to walk around and watch what people are doing. They'll self-govern themselves. I mean, I've been on great teams before where I never had to check what anybody was doing because I knew that the team was just going to take care of it themselves.
Hmm.
Right? I didn't have to be on top of team members to check where they were on their peer reviews for delivering code because they were being accountable to themselves. They knew I was there to be part of the team. I was there to help them with anything they needed. And by the end, they just got stuff done. I didn't have to check on them. It allowed me to do my job and they policed themselves.
Well, the good news is, Nick, that's a functional team.
Yep. Well, it goes back to Napoleon's old saying, there's no bad soldiers, there's only bad generals. So if you've got a dysfunctional team, you need to look in the mirror, because the problem's probably not the team. The problem's probably with yourself, and that's a tough thing to hear. But if your team's dysfunctional, you got to look at the person in the mirror.
Well, and with that, we've mentioned a couple of titles already. Are there other books that you feel like contribute to helping to shape that leadership mindset to be able to be equipped to
Hmm.
really help cultivate a trusting environment?
Yeah, I would go. Simon Sinek, Start with Why. Um, it doesn't go over a ton about trust, but it's a great leadership book just in general. And when you stop and you look back at the why you're doing things or why you are where you are, um, it's a good starting point for building trust, right? It helps you understand why you're doing things or why leadership is doing this or why even you're doing something yourself. That can help keep that open communication. And the other one for me be Creativity Inc. Right? They talk a lot about trust in that one. Ed Catmull talks about his brain trust and the people at Pixar reviewing movies and even letting the janitor come in and comment on whether this character thinks it feels real that a character would do this. But that's a relationship of trust, right? They trust their people to come in and give them feedback. And with their brain trust ideas, everyone can come in and give the director feedback. Does the director have to take it? No. But they trust each other enough to say, hey, is it believable that a character would do this? Does that feel human? Should you be doing X, Y, Z? No, those are the two from me that come off the top of my head. What about
That's
you,
great.
Brian?
Well, I would go back to that Brene Brown book, Braving the Wilderness. And, one thing that we didn't touch on was the V in her acronym, and that's for vault. And it was one that, when I read that book, initially, it took a little bit of time for me to wrap my mind around, where she was coming from with that. But the idea that, you take information that is provided to you and you curate it with a sense of confidentiality, right? That's like putting it in a vault, like in a safe, where people know that they can come to you with something, and as soon as they've shared something, uh, you know, whether or not they've asked for it to be held in confidence, the fact that they know that they can come to you and they're not hearing, this chatter, from others in the team or your work environment, where really they know that, hey, I told my leader this, and now all of a sudden it's coming back, and it's like a game of telephone, right? And now all this stuff's been misconstrued, and oh my gosh, I can't trust that person any longer because I told them something in confidence, it hasn't been held in confidence, and that's the last time I'm going to make that kind of mistake. So that's an area that, again, holding yourself accountable, and really, back to your comments on caring, Nick, being able to, really walk in someone else's shoes and have an understanding of where they're coming from, and having that drive your sense of empathy around whether or not the information that was just shared with you is something that you should hold in the vault,
Yep.
right?
I would think as soon as you hear somebody say, "Hey, did you hear?" Just walk away. Say, "No, I don't even want to hear that," because most gossip is hearsay, anyways. Um, so, and I think that's even her recommendation in that book, if I'm not mistaken, because she goes back and talks about some relationship she had with a friend, and that's when she realized the vault was the only reason she was having had a relationship with her was to gossip.
Yeah,
So there was nothing positive coming out of that conversation.
right.
Um, but it
Yeah,
goes back to transparency and trust. And we use a ton of big words today, like empathy and all that. But I think for me, trust comes down to caring. Just care about your people. and genuinely care about them. Don't be
And
fake about it, you know?
and for me, all the factors that we've talked about, create that foundation of what truly is a functional workplace. If there is an absence of trust, there's a lot of work to do. And to your point, Nick, it's like a crumpled piece of paper, right? It's going to be very difficult to smooth that out. You can throw all of the HR interventions at it that you want, but it's something that has to be foundationally correct, and it has to be cared for, right? It
Yep.
has to be curated.
No, I totally get it. And I think with that, Brian, that's probably a good spot to wrap it up, huh? All right, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Nick.